All right, let's
Sorry.
open the
Hope that was
November 19th meeting of the Recreation Revolving Fund Committee.
The Fun Committee?
The Fund Committee.
Turn around to me.
All right.
The fun committee?
And Dee provided us some handouts that are the worksheet, which is the selectmen's charge and the concepts that we have kind of created along the way. Basically set up as we identify things that we think are wonderful and exciting, we'll fill them into this worksheet and print them out for the next time and move along. She also has minutes here for
11/5 and 11/12.
November 5th and November 12th. So, why don't we do minutes?
I move that we review the minutes of November 5th.
Okay, wait a minute now. I took out my own copies.
Well,
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All right, what do we got? One of the things she did here was to put in the charge and the concepts at the top of the page as just another reminder, another piece of paper that we have these things on that we can refer back to. Anybody have any comments?
Line 26 and 27. I'm not even sure if the appropriate name is the select board, but should that, select board, should that be one word or two words? with
Well,
the B?
BOS.
BOS?
BOS, Board of Selectmen.
works for me.
Before, I'm assuming the 5 is no longer necessary.
Oh, yep.
Before, I didn't understand the 5, but I think that was a typo.
No, that was one of the line numbers.
Yep. But there may be a couple more in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a few more in there. We'll take them out if
Okay.
we find them.
And line 29, BOS again?
Yep.
29.
Is that appropriate, Chris?
What?
The Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I mean, it's
I
more of a grammatic kind of thing.
Okay.
Line 32, number 11.
Yep.
At the end, I think there were six of us that corrected them, not 11. You missed that.
You didn't fill in a 6 there, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No, that was another line thing.
Okay, and line 34, BOS.
Yep.
Charge number 2, capital T or on target, or?
I would just put a capital, small t, but put it in parentheses, target amount in parentheses.
Any objections?
Okay.
Nobody's voicing them.
Nope. CRF is Capital Reserve Fund.
Yeah.
So put a capital F on funds on line 36 and then CRF in parentheses after that to be appropriate.
Okay.
Line 38, period after CRFs.
Okay.
It is line 35 a period after 3,000.
Okay.
Period after camp director and 40,
Okay.
period after 8:30 PM.
Yeah, do you have notes on who, motioned for that, or do we need that? Does it matter?
Well, we should have it, but,
Does anybody remember who made that motion?
well, kind of writing them down along the way, so.
Line 39, remove the apostrophe from the last word, fees.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
No apostrophe in fees.
Oh, yep, okay.
Nope, don't know.
Don't know, okay.
I'll try to get it for you this time.
Milt,
For tonight.
the meeting's still going.
All right, any other changes to that?
Not that I see.
No changes, I move to accept the move as changed,
What, Brian?
amended?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Okay.
I'll second. If there wasn't one,
You want to call for a vote?
I will. Crossing out my bad copies.
I understand.
All those
Mine
in
wasn't bad.
favor of the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It sounded like
Get
everybody.
that batch out of the way.
All right, let me close those and open the other ones.
Okay.
So now we're doing the ones for the 12th.
Line 25.
Hang on, let me open them. Oh,
Computers were supposed to be quicker.
cute computers may be quicker, but I'm not that quick. I was saving the other one so I didn't lose the changes that I had just made.
Still have the other one open?
I don't.
Okay.
Did you need me to?
Well, I don't know if you did the BOS on line 6.
It's okay, I'll go in and search for select board and change it, do a change all to BOS. Okay,
Line 8, and line 10, you wrote RFF instead of RRF.
8 and RRF, okay.
But it was correctly
Oh,
done.
and on line 12 as well.
Yeah, and it was,
16.
At least I'm
17.
consistent.
yeah, and you
That's
were
not true,
consistent
because
on
on
the
16 and
on the-
17, you did it right.
No, but if you go back to the 5th, it's also RFF.
Yeah.
It
Or
is
she probably
RFF?
copied it. Or you copy and pasted it.
Too late, you've already voted on that.
We've already accepted those.
Oh.
That's fine.
Not a big deal.
Ay.
So I would say just anything that says select board, change it to board as BOS on
Yes,
every line.
yep.
If there's not a period at every line, throw that on there. I don't think we need to go line by line on
Yeah,
periods, but
that's,
those look fine.
do you have any idea who made the motion to adjourn and second it?
I think I made the motion.
I think you did too.
I think D seconded.
I think so too.
I don't think it was Andy.
Nope. No. No, it sure wasn't.
Can't spell my own name. Any other changes?
No, I move to approve the minutes from November 12th.
Second? As amended.
As amended.
Yeah.
Thank you, yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Abstain?
Wasn't here.
Yeah, you abstain? Okay. Sound like everybody? Cool. All right.
Bill seconded it?
I did.
Correct.
Okay, so those were the 12. Okay. So those are done.
All right, thank you. All right, you guys were talking about the 25% thing. I did not include that in here. I think we liked it, but I don't think we actually voted on it or,
No, we didn't.
indicate that we collectively liked the concept of it, because I think it was relatively new and, think about it a little bit. So,
So can I interject for just a second?
sure.
Andy, just so, I don't know if it made a lot of sense reading the minutes, but we were talking about number 2, the selectman's charge, should the selectman set a target amount for the RRF? And we went back and forth and we tried to figure out something that was going to be feasible long-term. So what we decided was that, or what we had talked about was 25% of the previous 5 years' average expenditures should be what is a target amount to be kept in. And then we had talked about the rest of the funds, any overages to that being deposited into a capital reserve fund. Any underages would just be an underage. It wouldn't be supplemented from a general fund. It would just be under.
And the amounts that we came up with, based on the last 5 years, was somewhere, was it?
63,000.
And 15% of that would, so we're
16
talking.
was about 16.
I thought it was 15 or 16.
Yeah, it was about 16,000.
So that's the dollar amount.
Yeah, rough.
But we've
And that's been pretty consistent, as Chris
yeah.
said.
Our concern with doing a dollar amount was that it would just kind of stick you into saying, yep, that's the dollar amount, instead of if things go up or down, the percentage just gives it more of a leeway or flexibility.
How did you come up with that concept, that notion? That was really neat.
I don't know, I just was listening to what Chris was saying about,
Yeah.
oh,
He mentioned something about solving for X, and that's where he lost me completely.
which is so funny because I am so bad at math. My wife would laugh at me if she heard me using that as an equation.
All right, so have we discussed that enough? Do you understand, Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Bill, you kind of wanted a week to let that percolate and have some thoughts on it.
You're right, and I'm comfortable with that. Okay? If I were asked, if I would, if one were to ask, would I participate in a consensus that seems to make sense, I agree that seems to make sense in terms of where we've been. And therefore, there's no reason to, it seems to work.
I agree. It seems to be a good overall working baseline. I mean, that's not to say that that's the only money they have to leave in it. It would be just that would be the minimum that we would recommend.
So would it be a minimum or would it be a maximum? Because if it's a minimum, then it.
But it says target amount, so it doesn't say minimum or maximum. It says target amount.
This is true. I guess I've been looking at it from the lens of that's a maximum, because any overages to that would go to the capital reserve funds in theory. So that would, but if that's a minimum,
the minimum makes no sense.
Right.
You're not going to add more money to it. So
No, but what my thought was, if our thought process is that they're reviewing this kind of as an on-needed basis, and we say 25%, and they look at 25%, and for whatever reason, something's going on, that they know something's coming up the following year that's being talked about, and they say, well, that's not going to be enough money, then they can choose to leave more money in and move less money, on that time. It's, it's just a recommended number.
And that's all it is. That's
Yeah.
why you don't need a
I
minimum or
think that-
maximum. It's just.
I think that
just
our
the-
recommendation would have to include something to the effect that we recommend that you keep 25% of a 5-year average of expenditures, not as a hard number, but as a working number. That way it does provide for, if they're gonna say, oh, well, next year we're gonna do this thing, let's keep a little extra.
Right.
It, our suggestion would be that they don't make it so rigid. But they have a guideline
Right.
to work with.
Is one of the things we talked about, Chris, was the transferability of the monies to the capital reserve fund? Does this fit more easily into the transfer of those funds to a capital reserve fund for recreation than we had kind of, or you had kind of been thinking might be somewhat hectic?
Yes, because that allows for humans to make a decision to bring it to town meeting rather than a formula forcing money in some way or other that takes away the ability to look ahead a year or something like that. So it still will require the selectmen or somebody, anybody, to go to town meeting and say, we need to move money from one fund to another.
Okay.
But it does set a precedent and, it makes it much more logical when that day comes.
All right.
Not if the only way that money can come out of there is at the direction of the recreation director with the approval of the selectmen. The town meeting has nothing to do with that.
Town meeting supersedes both of those by warrant article. So
By what warrant article?
any warrant article any article that goes to the warrant can,
So what he's saying is,
Can
if in
supersede
5
that.
years, if there's a sum of money left and someone says, okay, we should write a warrant article that says we're gonna move this much money, into the
General fund?
capital reserve.
capital reserve fund, it would be that new warrant article would supersede the rec revolving fund warrant article. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, supersede may not be the right word, but it trumps it. I mean, it's of equal.
Why?
Because it's town meeting created the first one. It's the town's money, and the town can move its money wherever it wants to at town meeting.
It's the recreation department's money under a stewardship.
Not if the town meeting says it wants to do something else with it. By the same power that the town can abolish the fund and put it in the general fund, it can
The town can
abolish
do
a part of
that.
it.
But I fail to understand why a vote of the voters that establishes the procedure becomes null and void without a vote to make it null and void. You don't get around this by doing an end run.
No, it's not an end run, it's just the town making a new decision about what to do with its money. It's,
Right, but let's take this from what we have presently. We have this warrant article. And let's assume that the plan of attack here is that every year, the recreation director comes before the Board of Selectmen. I don't know what the year is, but every year, she comes before the
Every
rec
5
direct-
years.
It's an average of the previous
Yeah,
5 years.
yeah.
And so, we haven't indicated whether this is a yearly thing or not. But
Right,
it certainly
right.
isn't every 5 years, it's just at some point in
At
time.
some point, okay.
And I'm gonna say yearly for the sake of argument. This 25% is figured out. The rec director is happy with the number for future plans, whatever is going on, to transfer this money into a capital reserve fund. What mechanism takes place to put that money into the capital reserve fund? Is it a vote at town meeting, or can it just go there if the capital reserve fund is already in existence?
to take, lacking some prior direction from town meeting. To take money,
I'm using what presently the warrant article that created the.
okay, so if all right, you take the one that's on the books now,
Correct.
you create a new capital reserve fund.
Yep, we create that,
Okay?
yep.
The only way that money can get from the existing revolving fund to that capital fund is town meeting vote. Only the town can take money out of the revolving
Via
fund.
warrant article?
Yeah.
No,
So, So,
This is what I don't understand.
so right now.
I don't understand this.
Right now, the current rec revolving warrant says that the select board with whatever from the director of the rec can spend or use or, use that money for whatever. So if that's the way it's written now, they can't create a capital reserve fund and put it in, because the capital reserve fund has to be established at town meeting first.
Yeah, my understanding would be that the selectmen could not take what is essentially unrestricted money in a revolving fund and put it in a fund that's restricted. A capital reserve fund is restricted. I don't believe they can do that unilaterally, taking money away from future boards of selectmen.
Okay.
Is really what they're doing. And I can get a legal verification of that, but.
Right. No, I'm just trying to comprehend.
No, I see what you're
process,
trying to do.
So
To-
if we
to
have
do
to
it-
go to town meeting anyway, then that puts a few more restrictions on whatever this methodology is that we're coming up here with, as to what further needs to be defined.
I still don't understand this. If we're going to establish a couple of capital reserve funds for the purpose of recreation, and the warrant article that the voters approve say that the town treasurer shall have custody of all monies in such fund and shall pay out the same only upon order of the recreation director with approval from the Board of Selectmen. That is very specific, and that is very clear that that's the process that should be used to transfer money to a recreation purpose. And if the capital reserve funds serve a recreation purpose, I fail to realize why this emphasis upon the selectmen going to town meeting and doing a new warrant article to move the money comes into play at all. The voters very clearly here have spoken. And I don't understand I don't understand where your interpretation comes from. If the warrant articles are set up for a recreation purpose, then the process here applies, and it is very, very clear. If the warrant articles are set up for a fire engine, then I can see what you're saying.
It's all about who, it is, if it's a classic capital reserve fund that only town meeting can spend, which is what you've been talking about, it's.
But now you're talking about the money coming out
Yes.
of the capital
Right.
reserve fund, not going in. But we were talking about the money going in before.
If what you're talking about it going into, this money that you want to move from one fund to another, if the destination fund is a classic capital reserve fund that town meeting has authority over, like every other capital reserve fund, like a fire truck fund, my interpretation would be that that any board of selectmen does not have the authority to squirrel away money in a fund with greater restrictions upon it than the fund that it's coming from. That was not the intent of town meeting. Town meeting said, the Board of Selectmen have the authority to spend this money. If you want to change the rules about who gets to spend it, town meeting has to change the rules.
Then, according to your analysis, if the recreation director wants to pull out $30,000 for a van, okay, from the rec revolving fund, that is a narrower purpose than money sitting in the rec revolving fund. And it's still, the process is defined, and it's defined very clearly.
I don't think
And
there's any- I
and
don't
the
think there's any
purchase of a
contest on
van,
that.
the purchase of a van is much narrower than a general fund that is sitting there. And I'm sorry, I just don't buy it.
You're talking about a general fund or a reserve fund?
I am talking about the rec revolving fund that serves a general recreation purpose, and when you move money from that at the direction of the recreation director, with the approval of the selectmen to buy a van, that narrows the purpose tremendously. which is the same argument that you are using as far as moving that money into a capital reserve fund. And I'm sorry, I just don't understand it. The wish of the voters is very clear here in terms of how that money is moved. And as long as it's being moved into a recreation fund, that's the process that needs to be followed. And the voters count for something, and so do
No,
words.
it's not about that. It's,
Chris, it is to me. It is. The voters have approved a process.
They've approved a process for paying out of funds.
That's correct. And I'm not talking about the money coming out of the capital reserve fund. That's a different process, and you're right. I'm talking about monies going into that capital reserve fund.
Do we have capital reserve funds right now that have monies going into them other than appropriated at town meeting?
no.
No. So this would be
Not even the
something.
ambulance?
So, Bill,
Ambulance
I
isn't a
guess I'm
capital
feeling-
reserve fund. It's a special
I've
revenue
kind
fund.
of,
It's
I've kind of
different.
lost you in what you were
Right,
saying.
but
different.
when it comes time that they
Right.
reach a certain level,
I'll wait till
isn't
he's
there something that puts money into a capital reserve fund for an ambulance? No?
No, we purchase ambulances out of the special revenue fund. Coincidentally,
Okay,
with town meeting approval.
out of the same fund
Yes,
that,
with town meeting approval.
okay. No, and I understand that.
No.
I'm just trying to follow you here. I lost you. You're saying in the original 1994 town meeting, Article 22,
Mhm.
it says that the town treasurer shall have custody of all monies
Yep.
in such fund, the revolving fund, and shall pay them out upon the order of the rec director with the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
So, are you, or what you were saying,
With
I should say,
proper warrant article.
What they-
are you trying to say that the rec director, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, can move that money anywhere they'd like?
No,
Hey, Bill.
Okay,
for recreational purposes only. And
correct.
if the capital reserve funds are set up for a recreational purpose, recreational facilities, I think is kind of what we talked about. A recreation van, that is a recreation purpose.
So,
Okay.
so they were,
There's nothing in here about a warrant article being required to bring money out of that fund. The process is very specific.
so in the warrant article, they talk about, it's very specific that the rec director can go to the Board of Selectmen and say, I want to take out $30,000 for a van.
Yep.
Do you approve? Good, boom, rubber stamp, let's go get a van.
Correct.
There's nothing, this verbiage in here does not lead me to believe that they can say, I want to move that money to a capital reserve fund. Board of Selectmen, rubber, like, boom, good, go create a capital reserve fund. So I guess I'm confused as to what
The
issue
capital
is.
reserve fund, in my opinion, needs to be created first for a specific purpose.
Yeah, we talked about creating the
Okay,
capital reserve fund
okay,
first
and
last
that
time.
purpose being, let's just use the general term, recreational facilities.
Yeah,
Okay?
okay.
According to this warrant article,
Mm-hmm.
how does money come out of the rec revolving fund for a recreation purpose?
All right, can I answer that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I just looked it up online in the New Hampshire RSA's, and it says payments into fund, it's 35:5. There may be paid into any such capital reserve fund, this is assuming that it's already been set up,
Yep,
except as provided under RSA 35:7, any such amounts as may from time to time be raised and appropriated from any source other than money given to the town for charitable purposes. Such amounts shall be within the limits of RSA 35:8. And any such town, district, or county may also vote to transfer said funds under a proper article in the warrant. In the case of a town or district, any of its unencumbered surplus funds remaining on hand at the end of any fiscal year.
does that specifically
not-
reference the rec revolving fund?
I think
No.
it says you can create I mean,
what it's saying is that if you have, for the first step is you have to have a capital reserve fund established
Yes.
for the purpose. That is step one. Step two is having a second warrant article that says the town wants this amount of money moved from the rec revolving to the capital reserve fund. The way I read this, the only way you can move that money is
which one are you
With-
reading? You're reading 35B2?
35. It's section
Higher level.
35. It's chapter 35, capital reserve funds of counties, towns, and districts. And under that, it's, where-
35B.
Well, 35,
No, it's not
I-
It's not
35B.
B.
she's not in B.
Go up a layer.
Just in the higher level document that talks about these things generally.
And it just says payments into fund, and it's 35:5.
So isn't that the assumption that we were working on last week, where you had to create a capital reserve, and then you needed to create a warrant article to move the money from the rec revolving fund into the capital reserve
It
fund?
is what we were talking about last week, yes, but I think that Bill has a different interpretation of who has the author.
35B2 says all revenue from such fees and charges may be deposited into a special fund established for such purpose
What are you
to
on? 30
RS 35.
We're not on 35B. We're just on 30.
No, but he's reading from
Or
35B, which is
into a
for
recreation
recreation.
revolving fund.
So,
We're talking
Okay.
about once the money's
And I would
already in
say,
that fund.
yeah, but if you look at the statute that the warrant article's referencing, it provides two funds, a special fund or a revolving fund.
But now we're moving from that to a capital reserve. And capital reserve is
A new warrant article.
a different warrant article, a different fund. So we're no
I'm not
longer
saying that.
talking
I'm saying
about
the
the,
original warrant article,
Yeah.
which references this, and the original warrant article doesn't say it has to be one fund. It just has to be for the purpose of rec. So I'm not understanding why there is a limit on what funds you can put it in.
but what Chris was talking about with the ambulance
I think we've gotten money.
No.
is a special fund, which seemed to be the same kind of wording as what you just read, Andy?
Yeah,
Right.
but I'm looking here, a revolving funds,
And so now I'm wondering if what we really need to create is whatever that thing is. The
A special fund?
special thing fund.
You could go, well,
I didn't realize the difference between them, but perhaps there is.
it does say rec revolving fund.
I'll have to think more about that.
No, that's fine, I just, as we
What
talk about
really
this.
matters about these funds is who has the authority to spend them.
Right,
That's the rub.
yep.
And with the revolving fund, it's the selectmen, and with the reserve fund, it's the town meeting.
but
That's a
isn't even the
dramatic difference.
special fund for the ambulance, that still has to come before the town to be able to spend those funds?
Yeah, because we do that every year.
Yeah.
We authorize a removal from that fund.
Right, that still has to
An
come
X number
before
of
the
dollars,
town.
yeah.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as long as,
Not really, it's right there. But
once we put the money in this new fund, it has to be at the will of the town meeting being spent.
And the function of that, as I see it, the function of that capital reserve fund is to purchase large things, larger than the normal operation activity. That's what I see it as. And you would typically want that to be spent at town meeting. That's the way I see it.
can you set up a capital reserve fund to specifically have like a board that's like a rec facilities capital reserve fund?
An oversight
board?
committee.
Yeah, an oversight committee.
The town can delegate spending authority to whoever it wishes.
So they can delegate to, they can say it will be delegated to the
Rec committee.
rec committee.
Yeah, in a lot of
but then
places, there's a
it
rec
needs to be
commission that
cor-
has
correct, and then it
authority
needs
over-
to create a
I
rec
don't
committee.
think a capital reserve fund provides you any greater protection on how it's spent. versus a rec revolving fund.
It's great, it's significantly greater protection.
Well,
Because
no,
right now that the select board can choose to spend that money any way they want. It's the three people that choose to spend the money.
With
Where
the-
if it goes
with
to
the
town,
dir- With,
with
I don't
rec-
think
the
that's-
current rec revolving,
no, the rector, it specifically says, upon the order of the rec director with the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
our current board of selectmen feel that they are the authority because we don't have a rec commission, so they are the authority and they can spend the money as they see fit as we stand right now, without Janet's input.
Right. I would
They
argue,
can
I
do
would
that.
argue that that's illegal, but
And I would argue that the voters don't matter if they feel that way. And that's exactly the same way that the school board is moving, and I have
Yeah,
a
that
real significant problem with it.
so would it behoove
What is
us?
what is that issue? I don't understand what all the work of.
Andy doesn't seem to think that having a capital reserve fund protects the money in the way it's being spent any more than it is currently in the capital reserve.
Not any
in the-
capital reserve fund set up under this warrant article.
But it wouldn't be set up under the current warrant article. It would be a completely new, it would have
You
nothing-
could, but it would still have to be based on the decision of the rec department and 3 selectmen.
No, it wouldn't.
Well, then you wouldn't be following the warrant article.
No, so you would have the rec revolving fund stay, and it would be basically amended to say that the amount of money that's in there is 25% of the previous 5 years' average expenditures. And there's a warrant article that creates a capital reserve fund.
You could absolutely.
And there's a warrant article that says all that overage for that first year, when we can, then they
You
can
could
figure
do
out
that,
that
but
exact dollar
that's
amount.
creating a new warrant article, so that's a new vote. And yeah, any new warrant article would
Yeah, no,
supersede the
I
old
guess no
one.
matter, unless we say, nope, it's good the way it is, leave it alone, we'll walk away, it's gonna take.
My understanding is what you want to do is create a capital fund without a public vote.
No,
No,
You would need a warrant.
no, it has to go before town meeting.
To create the capital fund.
Yes.
right.
To create it and to move the money
You
into
can
it. It's
change
two
anything you
different warrant articles and it has to go to town
Yeah, it
meeting.
has to go to town meeting. And then what she's saying is that once it's in a capital reserve fund, it is no longer,
Depends what the warrant article says
well,
No.
is,
that set it up.
No, it doesn't.
if the warrant article, so hypothetically, if the warrant article to create the rec revolving fund was created in a way to say that,
Janet decides everything. They could.
you could make the warrant article say that, or you could make it say that they create a rec committee,
Yep.
to
Commission.
Commission.
that involves the rec director, and they are given the power to spend out those monies.
Absolutely.
And
The town approves it.
so you could do it that way, and you put it in the hands of 3 to 5 other people besides the Board of Selectmen as to where that money gets spent. Or you could not have a commission for the rec department and leave it to the mass of voters to
Town
say,
meeting.
like, maybe 7 years from now they decide, hey, wow, we're ready to move on this rec facility. Somebody puts a warrant article in that says they'd like to take the money from that capital reserve funds and use it for this project, put it to town vote, town says yes, town says no, whichever way, the money gets spent, the money doesn't get spent. So it's either, basically it comes down to the Board of Selectmen and the rec director, a rec commission and the rec director, or the entire population of Nottingham.
Right.
No, I thought what Bill was saying was setting up a capital reserve fund that would only be spent on rec purposes with that overage.
Well,
And
the-
whether you would need a warrant article to do that.
Right. Bill's saying you don't need a warrant article to put the monies, the excess monies, into the capital reserve fund. That's what that's
And I
Bill's
think you
argument.
could, if the same rules on how you spend it are the same as the rec fund, meaning that Janet would have to submit the expense to the selectmen and the selectmen would have to approve it.
Right, and what Chris was saying is that you
Well-
can't take something that's unrestricted, the capital reserve fund, and make it more
I
restrictive.
don't think you are making it more restrictive, you're just creating a reserve fund.
If you
Well-
change who gets to approve it,
then it's more restrictive.
We're not saying you change to approved it. We're still saying Janet has to submit it.
Well,
and
I
it
think,
has
Okay,
to
well, then
go
it's not a
to-
capital, it's not a classic capital reserve fund,
And
which to
that's-
go back to what I
as
was
you
saying.
define.
And that's
If
what
you
I
do a
think-
classic capital reserve fund,
right.
that's not what you're
And
talking about.
that's what I'm saying.
We can do that, we can
Even
put them
the
in two different
revolving
bank accounts and
fund
whatever, but.
Under the statute that creates it, I mean, it says it can be used for land, so there, I
That's
don't
large.
think there's, yeah, I don't think there's
Yeah.
anything saying you couldn't do a large expenditure.
But the
out of
other
No,
thing
no,
that-
no, there's no restriction on
Right.
size.
Yeah, but the other thing that Chris was saying the other night, and I don't know if you were here when he was talking about it or not, is that the will of the people could go to town
Absolutely.
meeting and say, withdraw that money and, throw it to
Yes.
lower the tax bills.
General fund, yeah.
So it doesn't, just because it says rec revolving when it's written, doesn't mean that that's the only way it's ever gonna get spent. The
I
will of the
don't-
people means, it says you can do other things with it.
Maybe, because there's an argument to say they created the rec revolving fund.
But there's precedent
And
that
the
other,
point is that
we've
the
taken it
fees-
from the ambulance fund to buy a police car, so, there's,
Different set of rules here
Yeah.
as far as rec
Because-
revolving is concerned. And people at a town meeting have the authority to abolish it, which means that it all goes into the general fund,
Yeah,
okay? They do not have the authority to buy an ambulance with it or something else.
in a roundabout
Sure
way,
they
they
sure they
could.
can, they can just,
Yeah.
they can do a couple different votes, but
Yeah,
they can.
with
Take more work,
almost
but-
all of these funds, they can, the town with a properly noticed warrant and everything
Yep.
can do all kinds of things with their money. It's their money. Even if people 20 years ago said you can only do this with this money, it's not a trust. It's not it's not governed by trust law, which is,
yeah,
or
but this
probate
is
law, which
somewhat
is-
governed by tax
It's-
law.
it's governed
that
by
you
town
couldn't
meeting.
create a de facto tax. I mean, you have to do it a roundabout way in order so that you're not just using those fees as taxes, is my understanding.
I don't understand what you mean.
So you can't just collect the fees and say, we didn't raise taxes,
No, you can't.
and then use those fees as basically a tax. I don't know, that gets pretty legally deep.
You can't use those fees to offset, to apply against the tax rate, is what
Yeah.
you're saying. No, you cannot.
But maybe in a roundabout way, you could say exactly like you said, we're abolishing the fund, therefore it goes to the general fund, now we can spend it
yes.
as a general fund.
Yes,
Yes.
you can do that.
And that would be at least two separate votes.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, I thought through the mechanics, but yes,
Right.
it's, the authority's there, then you can always find a way.
Right.
All right, sorry to bail out on you in the middle of this fun. If you boil down a legal question or two that you want me to get outside opinion on, let me know,
Okay.
and I can do that. I'm
Before
off to the budget committee.
Before you go,
Yes.
are we kind of looking at what should be a special fund, like the ambulance? In what we think we're trying to do here, or?
I want to go back and read a little bit more about those,
Okay.
but I think the flexibility of the revolving fund is better than the flexibility in a revenue.
And
special
I
revenue
agree,
fund.
but I don't think it needs to be the whole batch, is what I'm looking for.
Oh, you're talking
So,
about the transfer?
yeah, if we could transfer to a special fund, I don't know that that helps us. I'm,
Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to protect it from rogue selectmen?
Well,
Using it for recreational
To
facilities.
get right to it.
here's the deal in my book. At some point in time, some large sum of money is gonna come out of the rec revolving fund to purchase something. And that should be by way of a capital reserve fund or a vote of all of the monies going in. It should be a town meeting vote to happen.
Yep. So you're looking for the best way to make that happen.
To me, the capital reserve fund aspects of things creates the nicety to make that happen for the voters. Whereas the present decision, present
System.
s-
Procedure.
procedure of the rec revolving fund does not.
Correct.
And I think it's better that it goes before the voters than the three
Yes.
selectmen.
I think the capital reserve fund is a far superior mechanism to achieve that.
Is there a better one?
I'm gonna look at the special revenue fund, but
Okay.
where we're not talking about, you're talking about theoretical revenue as as a surplus from the revolving fund. That may allow us to get to an automatic transfer kind of situation, so I'm gonna look at
Okay.
that, but,
You understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
though?
yeah, I think I know what you're trying to achieve, and
Yeah,
I,
okay. I'm just using the classic things.
yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay,
Okay, have fun.
thank you all. Have fun.
All right, okay. So,
So to me, it sounds like we're all kind of a mind that we want to take the money that's over the 25% and move it into a fund of some form that requires a town vote to create that fund and a town vote to move the money into it, and most particularly a town vote to expend that money.
Yep.
Are we all kind of in the same path there?
Put that way, I
That
have no
spending
problem. with it.
limited to rec
Didn't
purposes?
put the word only
I
in
would
it.
say yes.
Okay.
Because it came from rec
Rec
funds.
fees.
It's for rec funding. And I'm
Say,
sorry,
say
Bill,
that
what did
again
you-
so that I can write it down.
We want to take any overages over the 25%, create a fund, capital reserve fund, special fund, whatever actually what works out to be the best. Create a warrant article that would move the overages from the rec revolving fund to the capital reserve, special fund, whatever fund it's called.
not that process necessarily, but that the monies be transferred.
The monies be transferred. The money comes out of rec revolving
If we have to do it that way, okay.
and goes to the fund, quote unquote. And that fund would be used for recreation purposes. If we want to be specific, we would recommend that it be used for recreation facilities, but, and that the only way that that money could then be spent out of the new fund is by a vote
Vote
of
of
the
town
town
meeting.
populace,
Yeah, town meeting.
town meeting.
By the legislative body, I think is the appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, I
This-
think I got that down.
I think that would make sense. I said it better the first time.
You said it better the first time, yes, but
Then I
I was
tried
just
to
trying to
recall
make
what
sure
I
that I
said.
got all the parts of it down, yes.
I just wanted to make sure that we were all, because that's where I felt like we were all going. I just want to make sure that that's actually where we're all thinking.
I think that's what we're all thinking, and I think that all makes sense to all of us. Now, whether or not
Can I,
that's doable and what vehicle does it,
yeah,
we don't know yet.
can I ask you this caveat question? That new fund, would we recommend that it be one of those three? So we originally talked about it'll be paid, only be paid out by the legislative body, the voters, right? Are we, that's the way we want to go? Do we want to go rec commission? I'm gonna say we probably don't want to go the board of selectmen, because why were we changing it if we wanted to go
There
back to that?
is no rec commission.
We would
We'd
have
have to
to,
create one.
we would have to create
So-
a warrant article
Right, to
before the
create it.
town to create a rec commission.
So it
Yes.
sounds like option 3 is gonna.
Are you sure
That's
about
the option
that?
3 is
And
what I
then the question
originally
is,
said.
Are
would
you
the
sure
rec,
about that?
no, no.
Okay.
And
'cause
then would the rec commission be an elected position or an appointed by the select board position?
That I don't
there.
know.
such-
No, I'm talking out loud to kind of
Thinking
wrap my.
Seen where
I,
Thinking of.
and
Thinking out
to
loud.
not muddy the waters, I would say that our best option is option 3.
Yeah.
Any money expended out of that fund needs to be done at a town meeting
Order of the
vote.
rec
Yeah,
director
and
with approval, so it
The
doesn't say
legislative
whatever.
body, and
Right.
that typically,
That-
that is the
that's
way
just
that money
what
comes out of a capital reserve.
That's the article.
Because if you
Yeah,
look at
what
the
they're saying
capital
is-
reserve
what
spending,
is
it says,
state law?
to see if the
I know, but
voters
this
will authorize the
If they
selectmen.
specifically set it up.
Okay, and
Well,
that's the way
if
that
we
it works.
specifically set it up, we'd have to change it. That's what that comes down to.
Yeah. Because this is gonna
Skip?
say,
Does,
When we,
as the rec director, is that something that
The-
jives with you? Like, do you feel like that would be,
Yeah,
see, I don't think,
the
I think you already have.
the assessment board, we
Yeah.
had to take that before the town as a warrant article to
All of-
create the assessment board.
yep, all of these are created by way of whatever the state law says. So we'd have to look up Recreation Commission and see what state law.
Yeah, I'm
And,
gonna,
and my guess is you'd have to create it with a warrant article. If it was going to be elected, then the elections would occur the next year.
Right. Something to that
So
effect.
If they were appointed, then my guess is they could be appointed then for,
now that we've
Yeah.
done our talking, I guess my question now is for Janet, is as the rec director, is what we're talking about doing something that is logical to you as the rec director? Do you think there's gonna be hiccups with this? Do you foresee any issues with this as the rec director?
Well, I have a couple of questions, and one that, some that I'm gonna have to ask another rec director who does a lot of stuff like this. But one of them is that I'm really kind of not too sure about is the Land Water Conservation Fund, which is in jeopardy right now anyway. But the Land Water Conservation Fund awards funds, and you have to have matching funds. If those matching funds are in a capital reserve and not available until March, and, you know, those are the kind of things that I'm not really sure. I know that Land Water Conservation Fund money, you know, isn't readily available. It's not like they tell you in October that they're gonna give it to you when they get it to you in November. I
Right.
mean, I know that there's a time
So
frame.
is your concern that this money becoming available in a March timeframe is gonna hinder recreational opportunities?
As far as grant opportunities, that's the only thing that's come into my thought process right now.
Okay, so-
But when you say
there are
grant-
rec directors that have done a lot of this kind of thing, and I can talk to, I just talked to one of them about some of the things with Marston, and I can talk to him again. Jim Hilton from Newmarket has done.
But you mentioned
myriad of
grants.
things.
To me, that's money's going in to something.
Yes, but you
But if they
have
have
to
to
have
match it-
matching funds. If you're applying for a $50,000 grant, you have to have $50,000 as a matching funds, so that the project is $100,000.
Okay. But what does that have to do with either one of these funds? The rec revolving or
Because if-
this capital reserve fund?
If she
it's
needs
in-
the money before March, when the warrant articles
Right.
are voted on, then she might miss out on a grant because she doesn't have cash in hand, basically.
It still has a rec revolving fund, and it may not be the 50 grand.
Right. Right.
That's just my question to Jim, you know, is what I would do.
Well,
You know, to check and see,
last night,
timing-wise, throughout the year.
So that was my question to her. That's why, so the reason I asked is because if she had any of these kind of things that we may not have thought about.
Right.
And it sounds like there may be a way to get around that, but she doesn't quite know that.
I'm
So
not positive, I need, you know,
how many times has it happened, let's say in the last 5 years, that you have had to apply for a grant at a deadline before town meeting in March and you needed to come up with the funds? Let me ask you that. Is this a common kind of thing?
well, I would say no, but the Marston property is the thing that's really coming to mind, because the baseball,
Yep.
Baseball Tomorrow Fund, I think it was, we applied for a grant, and had we gotten that, we would have had to have $50,000 for that. And again, it has to do, those grant time deadlines and everything are all
And-
year round.
And you have to have the money at the time that you apply?
to show you had the money available.
That's part of my question. Is it going
Okay,
to be,
all right.
is it going to be okay
Yeah.
that we have $50,000?
But it might
it's in
not
a
be
capital
available for
reserve
3
fund?
months.
Right,
Gotcha, okay, because that's
right.
that was my question.
If we
too.
get awarded the grant in May, and we can't access that $50,000 until the following year.
March.
So
March.
last night at the at the select board meeting, we had a conversation, the PLIA had a conversation with the Board of Selectmen and Chris about starting a capital reserve fund for milfoil mitigation. And what Chris said, and I didn't write it down, but now I have to go back to him and ask him, he said there is a different type of capital reserve fund that makes it so that whoever you establish can spend it has the ability in certain instances to spend it. Because same thing, if we find that we have, milfoil in the middle of August and we can't do anything until March and then not mitigate it until the following, in the meantime, it's growing and we've got a world of a big problem. So he said there's another fund that allows for that to be able to be spent. And it sounds like it's the same kind of a thing, so we need to find out what type of fund he was talking about there. He used a term that I had never heard before when he was referencing it, so I don't know what it is.
And a lot of that goes to, we don't know what fund we're gonna use yet, so.
Right.
That made, that
But we
concern
have
may
to
be
have a
moot.
sense as to how these different funds work.
Yeah.
To make a recommendation, if you will.
So it wasn't a special revenue fund that he was talking about?
It was not. It was almost like something investment fund or something. I can't remember exactly how he said it because I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I was
It's not a
focused-
trust?
No.
Wouldn't have been a trust?
Nope. I was focusing on my presentation, not what he was saying, so.
Were there, did you have any other concerns off the top of your head?
Well-
No, the only other thing I was thinking when Bill was talking is that I understand where Bill's coming from as far as when we were talking about the capital reserve fund and the rec revolving fund. Money can come out of the rec revolving fund any time of the year, but money can only go into the capital reserve fund at one time a year. So when you're,
I don't know that that's true.
well, I thought that was, it only goes into the capital reserve fund once a year. Am I wrong about that?
Well,
I know we vote on it once a year.
classically, town meeting is a time frame that a warrant article gets put on the warrant to appropriate or to transfer funds from one place to another. That's typically the way that works.
But every capital reserve fund that we do, we appropriate money, so it has to be done at town meeting.
That's correct, that's
So they
correct.
appropriate money to put into the capital reserve fund.
But that money
This
is,
is a
And
different
then
type of a deal in that we don't need to appropriate money to put into the capital reserve fund for recreation.
And the only comment I have to Bill
That's
is-
why I'm saying it's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
I,
He sees
Yes
the
and no.
capital reserve fund is exactly the same thing as purchasing the van. Or purchasing a piece of property, or purchasing balls. It's basically the same thing. This capital reserve fund for recreational facilities is that thing.
yes.
Problem that I do have with what you say there is that by itself does nothing. Something has to happen to that. The van, you can drive around, you can do something with it. So my kind of belief is there should be some vote of the public to put it into the capital reserve fund.
I think that if you're
But that's because of the classic way that I look at those capital
Right.
reserves.
And I think if you're talking about an expenditure from the capital reserve fund or which one to take it out of, you have to have a certain amount, unless I'm not thinking correctly, that there's
To do what?
maximum amount of money on a purchase that you would take out of the rec revol. You're not gonna take a $30,000 van out of the
I
rec
wouldn't go there if I were you. I wouldn't go there.
Okay.
That's just me.
Because you're only gonna take big expenditures
For
out of
this
the capital
committee.
reserve
For
fund
this committee.
in general.
Yes. What's big? Well, we know
The soccer
Marston is
balls are
coming
gonna
up.
come out of the rec revolving, but the van's gonna come out of the,
General
We
fund.
have, that's another
that's
thing.
fine too. I mean, whatever,
That's another thing.
I
In
got.
my view, there
my
should
head
be a
ripped off
capital reserve
At one point,
fund.
when I was asked if I would support a warrant article for the van, and I was like, if that's what it comes down to, and they take all the money out of the revolving fund, then how else are you gonna replace the van? I would have to support a warrant article to try to get the van.
But that's not, this should be half and half. The van has purposes that are utilized, and half of it's for the
To go back to the,
general
Concepts.
people. Yeah, right.
okay.
Yeah.
And so,
I
you know,
delivered meals with it today to seniors. That's not a rec revolving.
so, to me, there should, I consider a van big enough that it would be a capital reserve fund that would exist, that would be matching funds from rec revolving and general fund. That's the way I look at it. Because those are
Say that
basically the
again?
two
So
purposes.
that you would appropriate half of the money and then take half of the money out of the capital reserve? Is that what
It
you
would be
said?
matching.
Yeah, so you
Whatever you
would,
put in the van revolving fund would be matching funds. So you don't need a van every year, probably every 5, 6, 7, something like that. And so if you created this capital reserve fund, every year, you'd put in
3,000 from the rec revolving fund and
3,000
3,000
from the general fund.
appropriated
From the general fund.
From the general fund.
yeah, or taxes, however you want to
Yeah.
phrase that. But
Yeah.
it
Well,
would be half and half because that's the way it's used.
Right.
Janet, you had mentioned the money going into a capital reserve fund. And I could be very wrong about this, but you get to the middle of March, you get to town meeting, the voters authorize the selectmen to put $50,000 into a capital reserve fund for a highway truck. That money, that $50,000 is not sitting anywhere. Okay, that amount of money probably won't be collected until first issue taxes start being paid.
right.
In July.
Now, I mean, there is an undivided surplus, and maybe they do, I'm not sure how the process works, but I do know that if you authorize a new police cruiser, okay, if you authorize some kind of a capital expenditure, if you will, chief of police can't come in on Monday after town meeting and say, where's my money? Well,
That's
he
right.
can and he does, but it's not necessarily available because the revenue stream is not available at that
Right.
particular point. Okay, so in response to your question as to when the money goes in, it may not go in all of a sudden on the Monday after town meeting, and because it's not available. There's not that kind of cash on
Well,
hand.
then conversely, the same is true too, is that if we had been awarded Land Water Conservation Fund grant I know that they've done them in October, November.
Yeah,
And they've made that decision, even after the money is approved to come out of the capital reserve fund, the actual money may not be available until
And-
July.
But there's also promise to pay.
I don't know
utility
about
bills.
that.
Like I said, I need to talk to Jim about timing of it, and he's done a lot of things with Land Water Conservation Fund and other larger grant programs. So, we don't have to waste any more time on that. Definitely have some
But
questions,
having said that,
timing-wise.
leaving you with $16,000 in the rec revolving fund, does that provide you enough to do your day-to-day normal stuff?
Week to week, month to month stuff. Does that run your recreation, your fee-based recreation program?
I believe so.
It seems
Because
like it does.
one of the things that I have I've been under the impression is that all the money that I spend goes in and out of the general fund until the end of the year.
That's what Chris said a couple weeks ago, yes.
Yeah.
So, when it comes down to it, it's not as though I need the money.
It's a journal entry at the end of the
Yeah.
year.
It's money
Yeah,
goes one
yeah,
way or another.
yeah, so it's not.
Yes, so, you know, the question is, would we lose more than $16,000 in a year? Would we,
And that would not necessarily be that $16,000 would cover that,
right,
okay? A shortfall, if you will, not assuming that those fee-based programs are basically pay-as-you-go.
right. I
If
mean,
you
we have
will.
several programs that generate revenue only, basically.
Yep. Yep.
Anything that's subcontracted basically generates revenue. We have a large amount of money, we pay out a percentage to the instructor, which basically leaves money, generates money there, so, which, you know,
So it sounds
And-
like it's,
And during timeframes, assuming we get this orchestrated properly, where there is something big that you would want to purchase, it is possible to take the money back from the capital reserve fund or out of the capital reserve fund for that purpose. I can't imagine,
but not at any time of the year, am I correct?
no, that's
Only at
correct.
town meeting.
But I can't believe you would be purchasing something large like that.
Usually takes several months.
It'd take a while before that
Yeah.
happened, and depending on the time of the year, it would take more than, just a couple of months. I would think they'd be able to plan for that and so forth and so on. So this approach, I think, seems reasonable to me. And I think it seems a little bit more protective. It sets up the process that could be utilized for future large purchases, assuming that we're all in agreement that large purchases, would be as a result of the vote of the people, by way of some presentation or something to
Yeah.
that effect. I mean, that, to me, seems reasonable.
Yeah,
All right. So, this is what I wrote down, which is somewhat more simplistic, but 25% of previous 5-year average expenditures. All excess will be transferred to a previously created fund for recreation purposes. All expenditures of these funds by the vote of the legislative body. Does that make sense for what we're
yes.
thinking of? In the, again, the
Yes.
general
Yes.
format. Okay, good.
obviously next week is Thanksgiving. The following week, we plan it. How many weeks do we have after Thanksgiving before they need?
Basically, we have two more meetings before their timeframe.
Right, and I asked Dawn yesterday, when I saw her, to post December 3rd and December 10th, in case we needed them.
Okay.
Well, December 3rd for sure, December 10th in case we needed it,
Yeah.
knowing that they would like to have it by the 10th for their Monday meeting.
I would recommend that next meeting, we spend the majority of the meeting typing out our recommendation as a group. And
Yep.
then I would even recommend that we come back on the 10th, having a week to process it, make any changes, and finalize our recommendation on the 10th.
What was your word that you used about me?
About what?
Digesting it for a week?
Oh, yeah.
I forget what it was, but.
Regurgitating.
Percolating it.
Yeah,
Percolating it.
Percolating it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Skip?
Yes.
Could you, before our next meeting, send what you wrote out to us so that we can kind of work on some of our own
Yep.
verbiage and whatever, and we can maybe bring some stuff with us? I know
Good.
we can't, they advise us to not send emails around and whatever, on some of this stuff, because if, you know, you do forward all or apply all, becomes a meeting,
Yep.
but that would be good.
I would say it wouldn't hurt for us to write up how we think our proposals are individually, and then bring that to the meeting, and basically we can each say, you know, the rec revolving fund recommends this, and, because I'm sure that all of us have a little bit of a different interpretation, a little different swing, somewhere in the cog, so
Yep.
it wouldn't hurt us that when we go to write the official recommendation,
Yeah,
that
and I will send an email to Chris, and I'll copy you guys, hopefully I'll get it done tomorrow, asking him these questions, so that he can hopefully have the answers to these questions back to us before we meet, so we aren't getting the answers
Yeah.
just then, because we have 2 weeks. So if, you know, he can maybe,
yeah, that
Find
would
out
be
the
great.
name of that fund.
yeah, that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I have on
Yeah.
here. The information about the rec commission, how is it elected, how it's created, and the different types of funds, and, you know, that we have,
You know,
that we should be considering.
I have an aversion to a recreation commission. And I don't know that that means a darn thing, and I don't know that it's within the venue of the committee anyway, but then again, a lot of other things have come up that's not within the venue of the committee, but for whatever that's worth.
I would tend to agree with you.
Yeah,
But anyway,
I would agree.
All right, so I'll fourth that.
Fifth it?
we don't need to bring it up. We'll just leave it away.
I would prefer a recreation commission.
You would prefer a recreation commission.
And
That's very interesting. I would not have expected that.
why not? Why not? The capability exists that,
This is not Janet's slush fund. It's always been accused of that
That's-
it's my,
Oh.
it's not my slush fund. I have no power hungry stuff going on.
From that point of view, I
really
understand.
like to have support when I need it. And that's what a recreation commission does.
Would
And
do.
there are
That's
times,
correct.
there are ways that recreation commissions are set up that are similar to like the Board of Trustees at the library. There are different ways to set them up. Some of them are, the Recreation Commission is the governing body, basically, of the Recreation Department, and there are others where the selectmen are the governing body with the Rec Commission, and it depends on how you set them up. And I really don't know the ins and outs of both ways, and the good parts and the bad parts of both ways. I just know there are different ways to set them up, and I know that sometimes it's me against the world. And that's, you know, everybody else has a department. The fire department goes in,
I hope you're feeling now that it's not you against the world.
police department goes in, and then there's Janet. I've been screamed at in town meeting. I've been, you know, I've been ripped apart in town
Well,
meeting
I have-
for this rec fund that, you know,
I have-
should be seen as a great thing.
wasn't even something you created.
And it wasn't even anything I created.
Hey, Janet, I've got 2,600 highly satisfied taxpayers that back me whenever I make a move.
This is like Facebook or something.
Move
So
to
I'm
adjourn.
Second.
Sorry, we jumped in on top of you, Skip.
In regards to Brian's comment, I'm gonna send out the worksheet again, with the updates. Now, what I'm gonna do this time is I'm gonna put each selectman's charge as the deal. I'm gonna take the three concepts that we have that I think are basically the methodology, as to how the revenues and expenses work, all right? So I'm gonna put those three under that, all right? Number two is the target amount, that 25%. What we don't have a good handle on, I don't think, is are there other policies or internal controls not currently in place that are recommended relative to the RRF? Think on that for the next time. I'm not sure
I think we just identified one.
Yeah.
Which one?
Commission.
The commission.
Oh, well,
Maybe.
That may be.
it could be.
I can speak, in
You-
terms of the way that, sorry,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
in terms of the way that the money going in and out is handled as a bookkeeping function, the auditors have never questioned it, as nearly as I can tell. I talked with Betsy about this, and she's never been questioned on it, and I don't think they have ever advanced a question about it prior to Betsy's being here. Okay, so that tells me that however it's working seems to be okay by the auditors. And I think that is a significant point to make.
Present auditing process.
There was a,
Is not-
not by the auditor. I think,
That's
but
correct.
There was an audit of internal procedures done.
8 years ago, or thereabouts, that was done,
And there were
Not
some
by an
minor
au-
tweaks, but other than that, yes.
and that was done by some, I don't know if it was done by Primex or what, but
Yeah, it was,
it was a security / financial, looking at the procedures.
Independent is basically.
It was independent, and, I mean, they told me that I ought to lead in April.
So, grants, I know is the wrong term. Scholarships, no, not scholarships.
Well, no, great.
Revenue streams that come in not based on fees.
They
We
need,
don't have those covered here at the moment, so,
okay, I know they need to be approved in a public hearing at a selectmen's meeting.
Revenues do?
Yes, like, if
To
there's-
accept a grant,
To accept a grant.
Okay.
okay?
or how
The-
about somebody donates money?
Um,
The selectmen have the authority to, I think there's a warrant
Accept.
article that was passed years and years ago that is a blanket authority to accept monies or to apply for grants. And I could be wrong about that.
But I'm-
We would need to check and see if it covers donations. I have not,
Have you received any donations?
we do receive donations. We receive donations of scholarship, donations of money to cover a scholarship for a particular child.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know, X child wants to go to drama camp, and I find somebody that wants to pay for that, so Y pays for it, and it goes in, but,
And it's done anonymously and so on.
As
and
if
so-
it's just a normal revenue for a fee-based program?
yeah, as though it's fees, so those are, you know.
It's
we
just,
we don't have to
basic-
cover it.
I haven't ever, I haven't gone to the Board of Selectmen to have those approved in a public hearing. But things like the grants that we got from the state, and grants from the Charitable Foundation, and grants from the
And not matching, they're just
New
grants.
Hampshire State Council on the Arts and National Endowment for the Arts.
So if
But in terms
somebody
of-
passed away and left money, would would that have to go before be accepted?
That would definitely have to be accepted and may not even be able to go into the RecRevolving Fund. When the theater project when the school needed us to take the money for the theater project out of the school fund, and we decided we could run it run it from us, we had to set up a separate fund, because they wouldn't let us take the $10,000.
Oh,
The
that's why
Attorney
there's a theater
General's-
fund and.
Yeah, the Attorney General's office said that we could not take the money into the RecRevolving Fund. We could spend money out, so basically what we did was we spent the money down for the production that we were doing at the time out of the school fund, and any money that came in to us. So 1 year, you know, we were spending out of that account at the school and bringing the money, the revenue in here. And then the following year, you know.
Janet, when you're speaking of scholarships.
So there are laws and rules with the,
Yeah.
When you speak of scholarships for a kid to participate in the theater project, what you're really saying is you got a kid that really has an interest and so on and so forth, and might not be able to afford it, so somebody else other than the family pays the fee, so it's
Still a fee. The fee is being
it's a
paid.
fee-based.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Now you guys can do it.
so I could
Motion
do
to
that.
adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who's
Thank you very much.